What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, or welcome if it's your first time here. We're always making videos talking about individual threats, individual topics, but today I decided to do something a little bit different and to make one talking about the 11 main threats that I see and to put those in order that I think that they should be put in, with number 1 being the most likely and the most dangerous threat, going on down to threat number 11. And of course, a lot of these will overlap and will kind of work in together. However, I tried to divide these up into 11 different topics to talk about each one of these topics. The first one is a corrupt mainstream media. And a lot of people think that, the biggest threat we might face would be World War III or supply chain issues or something like that. But in my opinion, it is the mainstream media, the corrupt mainstream media. They are number 1 in my opinion, because they don't tell the American people what's actually going on. They feed the people complete CIA propaganda bullshit information that isn't true, and to make everyone think and believe things that aren't so they don't see the actual threats that's coming. If we had an actual mainstream media that actually got out and done investigative reporting and actually tried to report the truth to the people through the mainstream media, the people would know what was going on. The people would know about all these other threats that we're going to talk about here in a few minutes. And if the people knew, they might be able to do something about that. However, we get through the mainstream media directly CIA, government, Biden administration propaganda, and that's what people watch over and over and over again, so they don't see the actual threats that we face, because all they get is information from the corrupt mainstream media. Whereas if we had an actual media that actually reported actual news and actually investigated what's actually going on, then people would see what's going on and be able to do something about that, maybe, and be able to make at least informed decisions. So I think number 1 is a corrupt mainstream media. Number 2 is a corrupt government, and this is mainly the federal government, but it's corrupt all the way down to the local governments. But the federal government is corrupt through and through, and I'm not just talking about the Biden administration, the Democrats. I'm talking about the whole bunch. They're all corrupt, they're all crooked, they're all bought and paid for, they're all puppets of the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, and China. And that's another reason we're seeing what's actually happening with everything else in this country, because our corrupt federal government. And I would say that the Biden administration is probably the most corrupt federal government we've had here in the United States, period. I mean, the corruption runs so deep all the way through. But the Biden crime family, the corruption is just right in our face. It's just horrific, the corruption, and no one does anything about it, and people think they're doing a great job, half the country does anyway, or thereabouts, mainly because of number 1, the corrupt mainstream media. Like I said, if the mainstream media was reporting actual news and doing investigative reporting, they would talk about the corrupt government, they would talk about the corrupt politicians, but they don't do that because they're bought and paid for. They do what they were told when they were told to do it. They read off the teleprompter. Number 3, corrupt court system. And we see this all the time with the courts. Pure corruption through and through. The good old boy network, that happens a lot around here, so However, at the federal level and the state level, we see what they just did to Donald Trump from Colorado. They've taken him off the ballot, even though he wasn't convicted insurrection or causing insurrection. He wasn't actually officially charged, I don't think, but he definitely wasn't convicted. However, that's the excuse they're using for taking him off the ballot in Colorado. And that will go to the Supreme Court, and if the Supreme Court says they can do that, then look for other states to do the same thing. They're not going to let, no matter how you feel about Donald Trump, he has his problems, I think, but compared to Joe Biden, he is definitely a lot better than Joe Biden. But they're not going to let Trump be president again, in my opinion. Go vote if he's even on the ballot, but I don't think it's going to do any good, because they're definitely not going to let him win, because the corrupt mainstream media, the corrupt government, and the corrupt court system, and actually a corrupt voting and electoral system. Number 4 is the open southern border. That's the 4th major threat. I think number 1, corrupt mainstream media. Number 2, corrupt government. Number 3, corrupt court system. And number 4, an open southern border. And we see the number of people coming across the border intensifying. It's increasing. And from my last reports I've read, it's up to approximately 250,000 to 300,000 every single month coming across the border. And it's getting more and more people all the time. It's gaining momentum. So it's not getting any better, it's getting worse. So that's definitely a huge, huge threat. And it's being done on purpose to destroy this country financially, economically, and they're bringing in terrorist cells across the border. They're bringing in all kinds of everything across the border, fentanyl. The children are being used for child trafficking. They're bringing in their own army pretty much to destroy this country inside our own borders, and the corrupt government, the corrupt court system, the corrupt mainstream media is complicit in it. But that's definitely a big threat, is an open southern border. And number 5 is the national debt. The national debt is huge and growing. I think this grew by over $2 trillion in the last 6 months, I think it was. I could be wrong on that, but I think that's what it was. But right now it's up going on $34 trillion officially, and unofficially, if you count all the unfunded liabilities and things like that, it is over $100 trillion in national debt. And that's not counting, state debt, local debt, personal debt. I read about 3 or 4 months ago that credit card debt personal credit card debt was over $1 trillion. So this country is drowning in debt. We're drowning in currency, and it can't keep going much longer, I wouldn't think, because of all the debt. And we're living on debt, and the national debt is absolutely horrendous. And they don't seem to be worried about it a bit. They just seem to keep throwing the money everywhere and trying to get more funding for Ukraine and for Israel and for this and for that, and bringing everyone across the border and housing those people and putting those people on welfare and medical care. And it's just ridiculous what it is. But then it goes back again to the corrupt mainstream media, the corrupt government, and the corrupt court system. Number 6, the globalist and the climate agenda. These globalists are doing things like trying to block out the sun to cool the planet. They are doing things like trying to ban fertilizer, trying to ban diesel, gasoline, oil usage. They're trying to put everyone driving electric cars, and the grid can't hold up. The food we need can't be grown without tractors, farm equipment, diesel, and fertilizer. So all their policies are against humanity and will result in massive famine, starvation, and death, in my opinion. But they're not slowing it down to keep implementing these agendas, and we see it going full steam ahead. And nothing good can come out of this, but that's definitely, this globalist agenda is definitely, globalist climate agenda is definitely a huge threat, in my opinion. It's going to result in mass starvation and mass death, in my opinion, across the planet, but especially here in the United States, Britain, Canada, these countries that are used to living in a higher standard of living, is definitely going to have a very much lower standard of living because of the cutback, the forced cutback on fossil fuels and trying to use like solar and things like that. Take, for example, the United States here. We have power outages now using coal, using natural gas, using nuclear. We have power outages now during summer heat, winter, when people was running their electric heat, trying to keep warm. We have power outages now. But we're importing, 250, 300,000 people across the border every month, and they're going to cut back on all those fuels we've been used to using and power sources we're used to using, like coal, gasoline, diesel, nuclear power, natural gas. They want to cut all that back and do it all with solar and wind. And we're having trouble now keeping up and keeping things powered up, but they're going to do it with solar and wind, which is impossible with the number of people that we have here in the United States. And they are bringing more over every month, more people to feed, to house, to keep warm. It's crazy, it's lunacy. But that's definitely a big threat, the globalist agenda and the climate agenda. And this all ties in together, but like I said, I'm trying to put this in order, I think. Number 7 is World War III. We see the United States and NATO trying their best to get a war started with someone somewhere. We saw them trying to get a war for going on 3 years now, I think it is. Maybe it's 2 years. It gets confusing after a while, so much stuff going on. But anyway, it's been over a year, going on 2 or 3 years with Russia. I think going on 2 years actually. And they've tried their best to get a broader war with Russia. And now we see what's happening with Israel and Hamas in the Middle East. Now that's starting to heat up. They want to get a war with Iran. The United States is trying their best to start World War III somewhere. And I think that when the United States and NATO get directly involved, like attacking Iran, attacking Russia directly, it definitely could spread out into World War III pretty quickly. And I think that's what they're wanting, and more than likely it will probably happen. And number 8, the cyber attack taking down the power grid and banking. The World Economic Forum's been talking about this quite a bit. They had their simulation called Cyber Polygon, and so it's obvious that they're planning on doing this. So more than likely to be a false flag cyber attack to bring down the power grid and banking to give them more control and more power. However, with World War III, it could be, a country like Iran, Russia, China, North Korea that actually does this, or it could be, like I said, a false flag cyber attack carried out by people acting on the behalf of the World Economic Forum, United Nations, and it could just be these big corporations, the companies that run everything. They could be just told to shut it down and say it was a cyber attack, and just shut it down and say it was a cyber attack, and let things just fall apart. And then they could come in with a solution, and the solution to give them all the power, all the property, all the wealth, and they will bring everything back up again. Number 9, supply chain issues. And this ties in with everything else. If you have the globalist agenda, the climate agenda is going to definitely make supply chain issues. You have war, supply chain issues. You have a cyber attack, supply chain issues. So number 9 is definitely a big topic, and it ties in with everything else, in my opinion. Even the supply chain issues will tie in with the open southern border, because you have so many resources here in the United States. If you're shipping in 250, 300,000 more people every single month that you have to supply with food, energy, clean drinking water, medical services, it's definitely going to make a huge strain on the supply chain. So that too could cause supply chain issues and massive shortages, in my opinion. Number 10, the Civil War. And I talked about this in my last video, where the left is constantly trying to demonize, white folks. White folks are evil, white man bad. White man is the root of all your problems. And we have, going back to number 4, the open southern border, and the people coming across that border are going to be hearing the same things, being told the same things. And we have, the supply chain issues, and they can't get fed, they're cold, and they're freezing. They're going to blame us white people. And they're going to use that to get a race war started, in my opinion. Instead of a civil war over politics, over right and left, I think it's going to be a race war to try to kill out all the white people. That's what I think. Number 11, an EMP attack. And that's could happen, but I put it down at the bottom on my list because I think it's the least likely to happen. I talked about that in a video a few days ago also. That EMP is less likely to happen than some of the other things that's happening right now, right in our face. But I think the cyber attacks is much more likely to happen because they can control that a lot more. They can bring it back up when they want to, especially if it's a false flag cyber attack. And it's much cheaper to do, easier to do, has more deniability of, I didn't do it, must have been the guy over here who did it. And they can put digital footprints, on whoever they want to, and blame whoever they want to blame for that. Demonize those people through the corrupt mainstream media, the corrupt government. So it all ties in together, but I think those are the main 11 threats that I see right now that we're facing, what we should be preparing for. But guys, like I said at the start of the video, all these things, or most of these things, actually all these things tying together in some form, and all will be like a domino effect. And it's happening now, and we see the dominoes keep falling. And I think we're going to get pretty much all of this at some point over the next few years. But guys, if you liked the video, be sure to give it a big thumbs up, greatly appreciate it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, be sure to do that, because I upload new videos here several times a week. And subscribe and turn notifications on so you get notified when I do upload, a new video. Thanks for being here, thanks for watching, and the Creekmore out here, and I'll see you all in the next video, hopefully.